By the way, thanks for putting this together.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, thanks for joining me. So we'll see how it goes, and we might do this again. We might not. Who knows? We'll see what kind of reception we get. Welcome, our first visitor. Folks, if you've just joined this room, this webinar, I would love for you, if you can hear us or hear me or see our videos, would love for you to chat that in and let us know we have an audio and video connection and you can hear and see us. Can you see my UC Irvine banner? Or is that too far away? I try to be a little my alumni, a little shout out here. Excellent. Thank you, Chitra. Folks, if you just joined us, we'll get started in a few minutes. We have a big crowd tonight, so we're going to let everybody get in. Oh, Tina, Zot, right back at you. See, that's what you do, Irvine. Folks, come on in, get settled. We're going to get started right away because it will be recorded. You could always go back and catch some of the questions and answers you missed. We'll give it about one more minute. Can everyone else hear me? I got one. Tina, you heard me. A few others, if you just let us know you got the sound in, that'd be great. Yeah, nobody wanted to check in with us. Oh, perfect. Mandar, thank you. Great, Jessica. Awesome. Great, James. Angelica, thank you. Excellent. So we'll get started then. Max, welcome. I think, Max, I've seen you before at some of our other events. So I really want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Julie, thank you. Come on in. This is our ultimate Q&A and our expert panel. You can see the four of us here. I don't know if I would class myself as an expert, but I have three at least, plus myself. Welcome to another Futureology webinar. If you don't know who Futureology is, we are your district-wide college and career counseling program. We are a free service, and we do events such as this. If this is your first time seeing one of our events, again, thank you very much. You're going to see a sticky message in there. We are recording this event, and you can always watch any of our replays, whether it's information on testing or financial aid. We run all our webinar replays at our website, CUSD-Futureology.org/locker. So you can go there and check them all out. This one will be there probably by tomorrow, if not by Wednesday. So if you miss anything or you have to cut off early, you can come back and check it out and listen to all the great expert advice that we'll have for you tonight. So again, thank you so much. This is a new one we're trying where it's really just a big Q&A that we're going to have. We got a lot of pre-submitted questions, probably up to about 40 to 50. So we're going to do our best to answer those. We'll hopefully be on for about 60 to 75 minutes. You can also ask questions here as well. Just a little reference again to Futureology. If you didn't know what we did, we do a lot of group workshops like this, but we also do one-on-one counseling sessions for all our district students for free. We do that at the shops of Mission Viejo. So if you are a junior or a sophomore and you're looking for additional advice you can set up an appointment just where you register for this event. You can register for a one-on-one. So hopefully we'll see you with that. I usually tell students, though, and parents, before you make that appointment, going to some of these events will actually give you more information and allow you to have some better insight as to how we can help you best. Because if you don't know, then it's going to be hard for us to help you as well. So attending something like this or going to some of our upcoming events, and I'm going to send you some files and share some flyers with you about some of those events, I'd highly recommend attending those first. So again, I'm the coordinator for our program, and I really appreciate you attending tonight. I know it's hard to always get away for an hour or two. A little housekeeping for this evening. I mentioned that in the sticky message. If you have a question, please, you can mark a question by clicking on it, and it'll turn red for us, and then I'll be able to moderate the questions to my counterparts. We do have a lot of the pre-submitted questions available, so we'll start with those, but you can have those questions coming in, and I'll ask my colleagues for the answers as well. So I encourage you to participate, even if you submitted a question beforehand. If something else comes up, please chat that in, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions we can. I'm really excited because I have a really great panel of experts across all ranges. So I'm going to kind of walk you through who we have on the session tonight. First, we have Erin. She works for Student Athlete Showcase. For those who have never heard of them before, they work with student athletes, getting them recruited. So Erin gets to work with student athletes on a daily basis, helping them either earn scholarships and find ways to connect and contact with college coaches and how to develop a game plan for that. So we really appreciate her coming. She is from Ohio. And for a lot of you, I know a lot of people like Stanford. She went to Stanford. She was an athlete at Stanford, a national champion. So we're really happy to have her, an NCAA gold medalist too as well. So she brings her expertise here. So we're really happy to have her, and she'll be saying hi when we get in and ask her some questions. So Erin, just give everybody a big Stanford hello. Awesome. We have Noor Haddad. She is with a CollegeWise. If you haven't seen CollegeWise, they've done a bunch of events with us before. They've done some college parent boot camps with us. They've been on some webinars before. So we're really excited to have her. She works in the Irvine office as well. I've known Noor for, I don't know, probably 15 years in the industry, and she's a fantastic counselor helping kids get into college. She's done some work at UC Irvine. You can see her degrees on there. What I really like about her is she bakes oatmeal cookies, and I love oatmeal cookies. So hopefully we'll get some of those from her soon. And yes, we do have to apologize. She is a Detroit Lions fan. Hopefully next season will be better for them. But other than that, we're glad to have Nora. She's a fantastic expert, and she'll be answering a lot of your college admissions questions having to do with admissions activities and all that sort. So Nora, if you want to give a big wave and hello, that's Nora over there. Then we have my buddy Jacob Cantor with Revolution Prep. For those who don't know Revolution Prep, they're one of the leading experts in test prep. They're actually our partner that helps us with the practice test program that we did in the fall, where we gave practice SATs and ACTs. Nora, Scott's got your back. He loves the Lions, so you guys can kind of hit that off. Hopefully that's the only Lions fan. But anyway, Jacob's been doing this for a long time in test prep and education. He speaks probably more than I do on a regular basis at different high schools, colleges, and at conferences all over the place. And he is from the Ukraine, but we still love him. And he has 2 dogs, but the biggest part of his family now is he just had a baby, Big Luke, just not too long ago, a couple days ago. So, and he's still joining us. So he might have to leave to change a diaper, but we'll make sure we hold him a spot while he does that. So that's my panel. This is me. You can read who I am. Like I said, I'm the college and career coordinator. I was a Division I athlete myself. I've been a tutor for SAT and ACT. I've kind of done everything. And one of my claims to fame is I got amnesia from a concussion playing a sport. So, you know, that's, I don't know if I remember that much of that, but anyway. So that's me, and those are our panelists here. So again, tonight, it's really about you guys and your questions. And so we've received a bunch of pre-submitted questions. I threw them on the board here. We're going to start with that, and we're going to get right into it, okay? And again, if you have a question that comes on, please feel free to chat that in and mark it as a question. Along the way, I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to send you some documents. When you get a document, if you want the flyer, just download it to your computer. I'm going to do a little poll. I might ask you a couple questions. So I'm going to do the first question in the first poll. It's basically, who are you? Are you a parent or a student? I really want to go and know who is part of my audience right now. So we'll do the first poll. So if you can kind of throw that out there, want to know what mix we have. And it's almost kind of half and half a little bit right now. Okay, so my panelists, we have a little bit more parents, 70%, 30% right now. So again, you know, some of them you can tell they're parent questions, some of them you can tell they're student questions, but it's about a 70-30 parents. So again, parents, one great thing about it, if there's something said here that you need to be repeated, you can have your son or daughter watch this back during the replay, okay? You don't have to, oh, I need to take a note. You can hear one of our experts answer that question. So that'll be great. For students, if you're not here with your parents, if something is said and you want to reiterate to them, again, you can play that replay. So that's number one. The second poll I'd like to do is I just want to see what grades that we have here. So if you will do me a favor and answer this second poll, what's your grade level? Whether you're 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 6th through 8th, I want to kind of give it a sense to my panelists what we have here. So we have the majority of juniors. You guys can see the poll, right? Perfect. So mainly juniors here. Fantastic. We have a good mix of students and parents. So that just kind of gives us an overall idea. So I really appreciate that. Thank you again. So I'm going to end that poll. And we're going to get started here. So Jackson likes the Packers. We kind of hear that. So thanks, Jackson. But let's get started. We're going to, Nora, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to go into the college admissions. The first bunch of questions, and again, these came in pre-submitted over the last couple days. And some is about AP courses and about majors with that. So if you wouldn't mind, and I can chime in as well, just kind of take the ones at will and we'll go at it for you.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just dive into the first question. How many AP courses does he need to take and which ones? You're going to hear a lot from me that is along the lines of it depends. There's not one prescribed number of AP courses that a student needs to take. What I always say to students is take on the course load that is as challenging as you can handle. So I wouldn't necessarily say that a student needs to take 5 AP courses per year if that's just going to drive them into having no sleep and not having time to do things that they actually enjoy outside of homework. But if they really felt they could take on the challenge, then that's great. What I usually say to students is also play to your strengths. So if you are really into math and science, try out the AP Bio, AP Calc classes. And if you're really not into reading novels and making literary analysis, then I don't necessarily think that AP Lit might be the best fit for you. So it really depends on your strengths, it depends on what you're sanely able to handle. And, you know, it also depends on the colleges you're applying to. It really, you know, if you're really trying to aim for a school like Stanford, then they're going to want to see a lot of AP courses. They're going to want to see the most rigorous course load that your school does offer. But if you're applying to a school that's not as selective, then you can go by taking a couple of AP classes in a year versus taking 6 all in one. So like I said, it really depends.
Or you can be great at rowing and go to Stanford. I know some people who might have had that happen too. So kind of touching on what Nora said too, folks, it's, you know, what other activities are you doing outside the academics? Are you involved in sports? Because, you know, it just might not even fit in your schedule. If you're playing a sport or you're in music or you're dance, theater, that you might just not have time for all those AP classes. And that's okay. So I just want you to know that that can be normal, as Nora pointed out. What can you manage? What can you create for that balance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. To speak to the second question, this is a really great question, by the way. If a student is deciding between AP Spanish and IB Spanish for 11th grade, what factors should they consider in making their choice? So what I will say to this is whether your child is trying to go for the IB diploma, that's one question they should take into consideration. But if they're not and they're trying to decide on, whether they should go AP or IB and they're not necessarily going towards a diploma, then the difference is this. AP Spanish and APs in general will cover a wide range of topics, but won't go as in-depth as IB, whereas they would go really in-depth on a few different topics. So it depends on the kinds of curriculum you really excel in, depends on whether you like to go really in-depth. And I would also say to contact teachers that you've had who might be teaching these classes. Ask them about the differences and ask them what the main differences are between the courses and whether they feel that you, as a student who has been in their class and who they've observed, would be more successful in an AP or IB course.
And Nora, Renata kind of chimes in. She's wondering are you referring to AP and honors as well?
So I think they kind of go hand in hand. What I will say about honors courses is it goes along with the challenging course load, right? So if you are open to, a heavy challenged course load and you're able to take multiple honors and or AP courses, then that same rule applies. Take on the challenge that you can handle. The difference will come in when it comes to the actual AP tests, right? Where an honors course will not have an honors test at the end. An AP class will have an AP test at the end that you can potentially receive a score for that would translate into college credit.
Great, thanks, Nora. And then one more in your trio.
Yeah. Okay, so this third question, this is a good question too. Will my student be accepted to a UC STEM major without taking honors or AP English classes? Or is it pretty standard to take 4 years of honors in AP English classes? This is another it depends. So there are some really competitive UC schools. UC Berkeley, UCLA, San Diego, even Irvine is getting up there. What I'll say about those schools is kind of the same lines as the highly selective schools. They're looking for the most challenging course load that you can handle. That's not to say that there's one particular formula to get into these particular UC schools. But let's say that you're going into chemistry and you absolutely know that you cannot handle AP Lit. That is not necessarily going to be held against you, but I would then wonder, where are you applying the challenge that you're missing from AP Lit? Where are you doubling up on science? Are you the president of physics club? Are you doing an internship or research somewhere? It really depends on where you can fill in that gap of rigor and how you are playing to your strengths. So I wouldn't say that it's required, but do keep in mind that for those more selective UC schools, they will look for a challenging course load relative to what is offered at your school. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come in English, though. It can come in the topics that you're more interested in. But I would really have the student evaluate themselves and find out what courses they really excel in and whether AP Lit or AP Lang might be beneficial to them or whether they'd rather play to their strengths in other courses.
Thanks, Nora. And the top of the UC chain, too, she mentioned Berkeley and UCLA is very different than, say, a Riverside or Merced in terms of what's expected of you. So, again, you have to do your research, and it's going to require more than the it depends. You need to really figure out that and kind of go look into that more. And that's, again, where Futurology can help you figure some of this out when you're counseling that and we know more of your specifics. All right, switching gears, we're going to talk about SAT and ACT. So really general question, Jacob, is just what is the SAT, ACT, SAT2? I'm going to flick. We got this question before, so we kind of wanted to put a slide in there. So let's see if I can find it. So is that the one that we were talking about?
Perfect. Hey everyone. So both of these exams are going to be college entrance exams. So about 3.5, 4 years ago, the SAT had a big redesign, right? And some of you parents that are on, you might remember that the test you took yourself was out of 1600. For a while before this big change, it was actually out of 2400, and there were some different changes, but let me walk you through both exams. So both are now just under 4 hours. And mind you, I tell you guys the length of the exam because these are very long tests, right? And we'll tell you later on in the program about all the different practice test opportunities. But my big suggestion always for all students that are thinking about testing is make sure you take some practice exams. So some key highlights. So 4 years ago when the test changed, it went from 2400 back to 1600, and really now mimics a lot of the things that the ACT does. So 5 sections, both have essay sections, both essays are optional. And I'll tell you, as you're working with your counselors, as you're working with Anthony and his team, right, those essays are really specific to where you're applying, right? If you're applying to a UC school, they're going to want you to do the essay portion, right? So make sure you have those conversations before you sign up for the actual SAT or ACT, because you actually do have to opt into those essays. So both essays are on there, but both are optional. So no science on the SAT. The ACT does have a science section, but don't be afraid of that science section, right? It's not I had to have done AP Bio or chemistry and had to have gotten an A+. It's really a section where you're going to deduct information from a chart or graph. So if you're really good at pulling information from a chart or graph, you can do really, really well on that section. So calculator usage for the SAT is very similar to what your students experience on the PSAT. One section, they're allowed a calculator, and one section is all mental math. And I give you guys kind of this data because I've seen some students really freak out when you ask them, hey, put the calculator away under your desk, right? So I know your students are already working on math problems, doing mental math, but it's really, really important because that's a huge part of the test. So it does go up to trig. There's no guessing penalty on both exams now, but math, this is one of the big differences on these exams. Math is over 50% of your total score, where on the ACT, it's 25%. So big challenges there. Higher order thinking skills. When the SAT got a big redesign, the president of the college board that makes the SAT, his name's David Coleman, he really wanted to align the standards that students are learning and the things that they're learning day in and day out in the classroom to apply on this exam. So it's really going to be high level thinking order skills where they're going to have to read a passage, they're going to have to process it, they're going to have to then answer questions based on that passage. So very college level reading, writing questions. So on the flip side, the ACT, 25% is math. Trig on the exam, no guessing penalty, but I'd say on the ACT, the big thing that I always get from students after I ask them after a test, right? Like, what did you think? They always say it was such a time crunch. There was so fewer seconds per question and the sections were very long. So, our big recommendation is make sure you take some practice exams, and we'll share a lot of those opportunities with you later.
I just sent everybody a file share with the practice test dates that Revolution Prep and CUSD and Futureology are putting on this spring. Again, taking a practice test to get a sense of where your scores are at will help you set some plans in motion. So we highly recommend that. Unless you're the junior and you've already done that, it's time to really think about prepping and doing that part of it. So, but for those who haven't tried it, we recommend it. Especially if you finish your algebra and your geometry, you're ready to take a trial and see how you do. So, okay, thanks, Jacob. And it was mentioned SAT2 in there, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. Those are subject tests, and those are for really more specific, or I guess more competitive schools. And Jacob, you gave me this slide, so I threw it on there about the subject tests. Let's see, where is it? No. Somewhere over here as I go through pretty much all my slides here afterwards, but here you go. So some schools at the competitive colleges require them, some are recommended. So if you're thinking about a really competitive school, you better check if you need these subject-specific exams, whether it's in a science, whether it's in a history. You don't want to forget to do that, because if you do, and now you're a senior and you go, I want to go to that school and I have to take additional exams, you probably missed your content. I always try to tell students the good rule of thumb is if you're taking that AP test, take that subject exam in that subject area, because it's the same test writer. And you'll see a lot of test dates. You can go, College Board provides those exams. You can go see when they're being offered throughout the year. So again, they're college entrance exams, the subject tests, or the SAT2s, people used to call them, and the SAT or ACT. So be on the lookout for those if you're looking to go to a four-year school. Okay, so I'm going to go back now, and then we're going to go into an athletic recruiting question here. So thank you, Jacob. We'll have a bunch more in testing. For Aaron, what do we have on tap for you then? There we go. So, athletic, how often should I be in touch with the college coach?
Hi, everyone. Yes, so that's a great question. The answer will change based on where you are in the recruiting process. So generally in your freshman, sophomore year, when you're sort of casting that wide net and getting on coaches' radars, you want to be making sure to get in contact with coaches about every 60 days. So that would be, an introductory email to introduce yourself to the coach, provide them with your stats, give them a link to your film, express interest sort of specifically in their program to show you've done some research. And then after you send that first email, we suggest following up about 8 weeks later, just with, it could be an updated tournament result. If you have a new PR, it could just be a note to the coach to say, hey, I saw you just beat Berkeley last week. Congratulations. Anything quick just to keep yourself top of mind on that coach's radar. Then as you move sort of further into the recruiting process, your list of schools starts to narrow. And that's when you start getting in more frequent contact with the coaches that are really showing a lot more genuine interest in you. So at that point, you might be looking at a phone call every week with a coach. You might have really consistent email correspondence as you're going back and forth about what test scores do I need to be able to qualify for your program, or specific questions about the school and the program itself. So that's when you'll see the contact become more frequent. But as a general rule, if you're still kind of in that exploration phase and finding your options, about every 60 days is a good amount of time between contact.
Great, thank you. All right, back to you, Nora, with another trio of questions about course selection. That was a big topic for a lot of the people that were attending tonight. So first one about, again, going on English class again, but as a freshman, then jumping into AP Lit as a sophomore.
Okay, great. So that's a good question. And again, I'm going to bring in it depends. So first of all, you'd have to see whether you can jump past the English 2 class to get into AP Lit. That's the first thing that you should check with your school and Futureology. Second thing is how strong are you in English, and have you taken an AP class before? If you're jumping right into AP Lit, that's a pretty tough class to jump right into and delve into. So I think depending on whether you've had experience with AP class, if you're really strong in English and really excel with reading, analyzing, writing lots of essays, then it could be something to explore. One thing I do recommend when you're debating a jump like this, that you talk to your English teacher. If you do have a good relationship with them, I definitely recommend that you talk to them, you ask them about what the benefits and costs are of going directly into a very hard AP class from English 1. But what I will also say is it's not going anywhere. So if you decided that you wanted to go into Honors English 2 and then jump into AP Lit, then I think that's still a perfectly fine trajectory for you. But it really does depend on a lot of introspection about yourself and how much you'd be able to handle. And this kind of ties back to that first theme. You don't have to jump right into taking AP Lit in sophomore year. But if you really do want that challenge and you're a literary nerd and you feel you can really handle it, then it could be something to consider. Oh, sorry. I think, Anthony, were you about to say something?
No, I was going to say, and part 2, so. By the way, these are great questions, folks, and it's great that you're thinking about all this stuff. And as Nora pointed out, it's a lot of times it's talking to the people around you, your teachers, your counselors, advisors. You can't make this decision sometimes by yourself, talking to your parents or parents talking to the kids. It's not just, shouldn't just be made immediately without any thought into it. So I really like what you said, Mark.
So the second question is a great question too. Do colleges tend to select students more on how many AP classes they took or their GPA when determining a student's work ethic? This is a case where it really depends on the student. A transcript tells a story. It's not just your GPA, and it's not just the number of AP courses you've taken. It's how well you've done in them. It's how many improvements you've made, right? So a student who might have had a couple C's first year and then didn't get any C's second year, tried their first AP class in their junior year, might be really impressive to a college because it really demonstrates that they were on their thing. They decided to take on the challenge that they could handle junior year, and they did well in it. Also, a student who started taking APs, sophomore year, they started to be able to handle it at that point, and then gradually grew in the number of AP classes and rigorous classes that they took, is also impressive. I think one thing to keep in mind is that a huge part of your demonstrated work ethic is going to come from your letters of recommendation too. So when you are a junior, you want to start thinking about the teachers that will write you a really strong letter of recommendation. And I say this because, I say strong because it's not just the teacher that you got an A in their class in, it's the teacher that sees your work ethic and sees how you are as a student in the classroom and as a classmate. And as someone who, may have struggled with some things and then got help and actually was able to be courageous and ask for help. So there are a lot of ways for you to determine that. And it's not just based on the GPA, and it's not just based on the number of classes that you take.
And it's not just academically too, whether you're a musician, sport, internship, like there's other ways to show work ethic. So if you're just looking to show work ethic, it doesn't even just have to be academic. It could be you started a club and you were the president and vice president, like you did a lot of work, like that can show it as well. So again, they look beyond just the classes, they look at a lot of things. So work ethic can be shown in many different ways.
Exactly. And then as to the third question, so this is a really specific question, but I'll kind of pick apart pieces of it. I'm a junior in an AP calculus and want to major in education. Will it hurt my chances of being admitted to college by taking AP psychology instead of another year of math? First of all, congratulations junior year. That's amazing. Secondly, I don't know exactly what your college list looks like, so it's kind of hard for me to give specific advice to this question, but I will say in general, if you've gone through AP Calculus by junior year, that means that you have taken 4 years of high school level math. And so depending on the college that you're applying to, you've probably equaled or exceeded the number of math years that you need in college. Again, depends on the college, depends on how selective they are. And it depends on what they do expect of you, how rigorous you want your course load to be. Now, if you say that you're going into education, you really want to learn about psychology and you've been so excited to take that class, then yeah, say that it's worth it for you to take AP Psychology because you have met the math requirements depending on the school that you're applying to. So it goes back to that theme of playing to your strengths, making sure that you're meeting the requirements needed, which again, if you make an appointment with Futureology, you can kind of play through that and come up with an idea of what courses to plan exactly based on your specific transcript. But in general, those are the answers that I'd give you. I always say that you should take advantage of the courses that are offered at your school because you never know what, a course might lead you into, whether it's, you being really interested in psychology and reading a bunch of books on it, or figuring out that once you get to psychology or once you get to bio that you really don't want to be a pre-med major, it's really important that you test out different classes. So again, very specific, but I think that it really depends on your situation. But if you've met the requirements and you really want to try out a class, then I say go for it.
Great. Thanks, Nora. And folks, there's lots of questions coming in. Jacob's been answering a lot that are in the chat about testing already. So you should also take a peek there, get some answers in there. But I'm going to turn it over to Jacob now because this is actually a question that kind of came up. So which test should my son take? The SAT, all of them, Where do you kind of sit with that, Jacob?
Thanks. So good question that I get often every time I speak. So virtually every single college now will accept one or the other, right? I was at a presentation up at Mountain View High School, right? And I had a parent come up to me afterwards and, she was so thrilled. She said, "Oh, Susie just got a 35 on her ACT." And I was freaking out. I was like, "Oh man, that's awesome. That's a great score." And the mom said, "Oh yeah, now we're going to try the SAT and try to get a high score on that," right? And I cautioned that mom, right? Like, your teenagers are teens, right? Have them focus in on one test, take the test, do well, be done with it, right? There's no reason for them to do both exams. So your students just took the PSAT in, Anthony, remind me, in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade at most schools, correct?
Well, this year we didn't have it for 9th graders. Some 10th graders did or did not take it, but some took the practice test that you guys hosted at some of the schools and stuff. So a lot of them will have had tests under their belt and kind of have a score now. And one of the reasons we're offering the practice tests and having you guys come down to do an SAT and an ACT is so they don't fall into that trap. They know which test. They can pick one and make a move and decide and move on. So you're not taking all the tests. Now, you might take both for the practice test, but then you move forward with one based on kind of what you're saying right there. And, hey, the kid got a 35. Let's move on and focus on all the other things that matter in this process. If you saw the chat, Jacob was even saying that he's seen perfect scores not get into UCLA. So like at some point they look at other things. Okay, we know you're smart. What else is next? So again, read the chat. Some of his answers are kind of spot on. So make sure that you keep that in mind. But that's why the practice tests are so important. So one, as your counselors or when Nor has a student, knowing where they're at, it's going to help us advise you what we need to do next. Or let's move on to the next thing. You already got that under your belt. Great score. Now let's focus on other things. So
definitely. And one thing to remember, right? It's just one piece of the puzzle, with schools, and I'm sure, everyone's really seeing it, right? Like a school like UCLA, I hate to harp on it, right? It's in our backyard, but with 100,000 students that are applying there, that means that there's a lot of really bright kids and there's a lot of really good test scores, right? So that's really when it comes, in clutch, where you have your meetings with your counselors, right? And you create your diverse list and all of the things your counselors are going to help you with. So, shout out to all of the Futureology folks, all the counselors at your schools, right? Like, use them as a resource, right? There's a tremendous amount of students at a lot of the schools you attend to. And, sometimes you really have to raise your hand and say, "Hey, I need help," right? Because there's, more students than counselors, right? So make sure you're definitely a self-advocate.
great. Let's now, we got another question. I want to try to make sure that we don't fall behind. So how advisable or not is it to take an AP exam with self-study? And self-study, test prep, all that, everybody wonders, well, one, it's going to depend. Are you, like, I'm not good at self-study, or when I was in high school, I'm just not that disciplined enough. Also, how are you doing in the class? Talk to your teacher. Where do they think you are on that? Because if you're going to take the test, you might as well go for it and do well on it. So self-study is really going to depend on the student. Also, the subject, is it your strength? And then you probably can do fine with self-study. Some people might need a course or some extra work, might need to spend some more time. So again, using what's happening in your class is going to help you decide if you should really put more time into it. Again, ultimately, too, if it's a financial thing as well, getting that extra credit for college could mean savings down the road. So I don't know, how important is that to you? Especially, imagine you had to pay for your own college way. Well, then I bet you're going to study even harder for that AP test. So, all right, moving on to back to athletic recruiting. How hard is it to play a sport in college? If you can give us your experience, Aaron, and what advising all these student athlete showcase athletes and what you see and what you know to be.
Yeah, so I think the answer sort of can fall in two buckets. So when I see, is it hard to play in college? I think, well, there's the physical aspect. How difficult is it to compete at that level? And it really comes down to the kids who are being recruited to play in college are generally the top, 5 to 10% of the athletes in high school. And so chances are, if you're already performing at that level, you sort of know what it takes physically to excel in your sport. Now, college definitely does raise the bar on high school athletics, but if you're already at that level, ready to compete, ready to be recruited, that raised bar will only help you contribute as a more active member of the team. So I think physically it's hard, but you know that. The second bucket of how hard is it, I think really comes into play with time management and the time that it takes to really compete at a high collegiate level. So the NCAA actually released a study in 2016, that was the most recent one, about the time commitment that it takes to be a collegiate athlete. And if you're looking at playing D1 sports, that's about 34 hours a week that you're spending just on athletics alone. D2, it goes down to about 32 hours a week. D3 goes down to about 28. So there are a couple of different levels, but across all three divisions, it's a huge time commitment. And then you put that on top of keeping up with your classes, making sure you're showing up, getting your assignments done. You'll likely, through your sport, have to participate in a study hall or an academic tutoring program. And so that's kind of the bigger question that you'll have to ask yourself is, are you willing to commit to 70 to 80 hours a week on athletics and academics combined? And I think that's where, the higher level of difficulty comes in, depending on what schools you're looking at and what division you're wanting to compete at.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. All right, moving back to you, Nor, and we're still on course selection. So, and then we got another one in there. So we'll start with this one. Diego's asking, I'm taking AP Environmental Science and I'm doing all right. Would it hurt me not to take the AP exam if I want to get into UCI?
What I'll say is that they'd kind of wonder why you took the class and then didn't take the test. I will also say that even if you get a 3, you could qualify for credit. So I would try it. I would attempt it, study as hard as you can, attend review sessions. And I think it's worth it to try. I would wonder why you weren't attempting the test if your entire year was based on preparing for the test. So I would err on the side of attempting it.
Especially for a school like that, too.
Yeah, exactly. And UCI is getting a lot more competitive. So if you really want to be a good candidate for them, try to take the AP test. That kind of goes into this first question that it looks like here. Is it true that your AP scores don't need to be as high as if you go to community college first? Not necessarily. In fact, I was just looking up a couple of community colleges, and pretty much all across the board, you have to get at least a 3 in order to get credit for your AP exams. I think it will be a little bit different, if you're planning to transfer into 4-year, there are a lot of other factors to go into it. But if you're going into community college and you want to get placement credit, you have to get at least a 3. So I would also advise that you look at the community college website because they usually have a very clear chart on, okay, here was your score, here are the classes that you are going to get credit for, and go from there. Okay, the second one, do colleges look at senior year classes and grades? How much emphasis should be placed on academics during this year? Great question. Do not get senioritis. Do not do that. Don't take 3 academic classes and then expect to be perfectly fine getting into a really competitive school. What will happen is on your applications, on all of them across the board, you will be asked for your 12th grade courses. What courses are you in right now and what courses do you have planned? In many cases, colleges will ask for your mid-year reports, which are your first semester senior year grades. That means you can't slack off. So I would not try to take all the easy courses if you've had a trajectory of actually increasing the challenge. They'd expect that you'd be at or above the level that you were at in junior year, depending on where you were. So relative to your level of rigor and your level of challenge, you should be consistent in senior year, and definitely get the best grades you could possibly get. Continue your streak. So I definitely don't recommend you go easy or that you just slack off and try to just get all C's if that's not your educational history. Okay. The third
And then the third question is, it was a question
I was
about
gonna pass
our
that
school
to
district.
you.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
So somebody was asking about the Seal of Biliteracy, which is something you can get by taking 4 years of a language. Yeah, if you took Spanish 1 and you started it in 8th grade, that would count as a year. Just like if you were going to a UC school and you took Spanish 1 in 8th grade, that would count as part of your UC A through G requirements, taking that language. So yes, that would count. So if you are doing that, then that's good. You're on your way towards that. So we'll kind of wrap that up. Jacob, it looks like I put the same question, and this is just because I do things too fast and sometimes I'm not paying attention. So I'm going to ask you a different question, which is right below that. So the follow-up question for testing and prep is about what SAT and ACT scores are needed for entry to UC and Cal State. So it's a very general question. I actually put some slides together and I have a handout. So while you're talking about it, folks, I'm going to send you some stats and data, not for this year, but just it's going to be very similar for UCs and Cal States, as Jacob's talking, that has some of that data. So you guys can kind of, one, be shocked, unfortunately, and kind of just see what's happening in the on the admissions front. And I'm going to turn to a slide that has some of that. Oh, here we go. So this is some of the UC data, Jacob, if you want to kind of talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so can you go back one slide? I'll start there, and then I'll kind of so this is a really good document, and I always recommend all students to kind of look at, right? So this is interquartile. It's a concordance table, right? So based on a student's SAT score and ACT score, it'll give you the percentiles. And what I really recommend families and students to use this is, as you're looking at your PSAT score and you find that, oh, you're in the 80th percentile. Oh, you took a practice ACT and you scored 34 and you're in the 99th percentile, right? Really let the numbers dictate which tests you're going to take. And I really like this slide, and as you look at it later, it'll give you some schools to the right, but there's, again, over 2,000 different colleges to think about. And I really like this slide, and there was a couple questions about UCLA and what score is a good score for UCLA, and we kind of addressed that on the chat. But UCLA is the most applied to school in the nation, right? And I always refer in all my presentation as UCLA is the Nike. Good or bad, you like Nike, you don't like Nike, everyone's applying there, right? So you have to have a really good GPA and test score, but you have to be, those are just one piece of the magical pie for college admission. So the one thing I always advise students, and Anthony, stop me at any point, is you can Google admitted student profile at every single college you're looking at, right? So if you're looking at, University of Nevada, and that's one of your schools that you're thinking about, you can Google admitted student profile for University of Nevada, right? You can go on their website and find it there too. I just find that that's always a much quicker way to find it. So again, you guys have a lot of great resources. You have a lot of great counselors there to help you guys out. As you're building your list, have those conversations with them. And, as more and more students are applying to a lot of these schools, more and more of them are using test scores to really kind of try to figure out this piece of puzzle, right? I had a presentation with Gary Clark, the director of admissions from UCLA at Calabasas High School, not far from where I live here in LA. And, the one thing he said, I can take all 100,000 applicants, put them in an Excel sheet, sort by SAT and GPA, and have a decision on who I'm going to accept right away. But that's not how they do it, right? And I always want students to realize, yes, you're going to spend some time on testing. Yes, you're going to spend some time thinking about subject tests. Yes, you're going to spend some time thinking about your APs. But there's a lot other than those factors, right? Your college essays, your extracurricular activities, all the things that, the other counselors that are joining here tonight are going to talk about. So that's just one piece of the puzzle. But again, for UC specifically, Anthony, what are you seeing as far as, number of students and test scores?
Yeah, no, I mean, just in general, folks, the way I kind of put this is we can't just throw a school on our board and now it's on our board. We have to look at the data to give you a sense of how realistic you are, because a lot of people, they're going to put UCLA on the list, but they don't know, well, I have this GPA. This data here is going to show you and give you a sense of where that school will be on your list. Am I reaching for it? I have a good shot at it, or this is likely, or this is unlikely. And that's going to help you manage and create a list. So for my juniors on this call tonight, by the way, I've shared this file with you, this UC file. I shared a Cal State file, and I shared you NOR's file with some tips, which is going to be helpful. So again, there's so many resources out there, but when we look at this data, it's really important that you have what we call just a balanced list, and Nora will back me up on that. And I'm sure she does this with her students all the time, is, there's creating a good list and there's creating a bad list. It's a bad list when all the schools on your list are, under 20% acceptance and you're not even close to the range. Even if you were in the range, it shouldn't be that way, because then you're not going to get into many of your schools. So really important to create a really good list. And so I don't have it here, but we're having what we call our college list jumpstart for our juniors at all our high schools, where my counselors come in and help you start to create a list, how to look at the data to make sure that school should even be on your list based on lots of different criteria besides you just saw them on TV. So this data, what we're finding, Jacob, is a lot of kids and families are putting schools on their list that have no business being on their list because they didn't even look at their own credentials versus the credentials of the school, number one. Number two is they're somehow disregarding their test score or their GPA, thinking that they can throw a school on the list. And it just doesn't work that way. Sometimes there are other outstanding factors that go into it. Whether you're a certain athlete, or there's certain thing, you're a dancer or something maybe. But overall, there is no formula, but one formula is for sure, is if you're not even close, it's going to be really hard to get into that school. And so when we look at this data and you see UCLA at 12% acceptance rate, there's valedictorians that don't get in. There's perfect scores that don't get in because they just don't have the space. And there's so many good students applying. So again, my advice is let's pick a list that suits you the best, and we'll have more success and we'll have a better experience kind of going through this process together. And then here's some of the Cal State data, again, which I sent you. And even you're starting to see the Cal State numbers are going higher and higher because of all the kids that are applying to that even the Cal States which back in my day, it was a shoo-in for some of those schools, and now it's not the case. Even North said it, UC Irvine, my alma mater, they probably wouldn't let me in the door. They can, even if I could score a goal, it's so hard to get into some of those schools now that you have to actually be very methodical about this process and about what schools you put on your list. So that's kind of my warning and advice. But the good news is we have resources and we have workshops and we have your counselors and advisors, or even if you use a private counselor like Nora, they're going to help you create a list, or we're going to help you create a list that makes sense for you and nobody else, So, all right, let's get back. I know there's so many great questions and we're just kind of at the surface. So let's kind of hit this. Let's try to finish this first page of ones. And then, so we are now at, athletic recruiting. So Aaron, can I wait till I'm junior to start the process, and how many schools coaches should I be targeting?
Yeah, that is a huge question that we get from families all across the country, is when am I supposed to start this whole recruiting process? And it has been getting earlier and earlier every single year. So the general rule is that team sports recruit a lot earlier than individual sports. So if you're looking at men's soccer, lacrosse, baseball, those are recruiting sooner than tennis or track and field. So with those team sports, you're seeing a lot of coaches talking to athletes in their 8th grade freshman, sophomore year. So if you're a team sport athlete, you want to make sure you're really getting on that ball as fast as you can, so you're not getting kind of left out of those recruiting classes. For sports like golf, tennis, track and field that are more individual based, you can kind of wait a little bit more till the end of your sophomore year, early junior year. And that's just kind of the general trend across the sports. Another thing to note is that women's sports recruit even earlier than men's sports. So with women's basketball, women's lacrosse, softball especially too, 80% of girls are talking to coaches before they get to their junior year. So if you're waiting till junior year, you're not out of options, but you may be a little bit more limited. You may need to reach out to coaches a little bit more aggressively to get on their radar. And then how many coaches should you be targeting? This kind of depends on if you have any restrictions in terms of where in the country you want to compete, if you're, stuck on D1, if you definitely want to play D2. So there's a couple different, preferences on your own that can determine how many schools you're reaching out to. I was recruited back in 2008, which makes me feel old. I reached out to probably 40 coaches and then was talking pretty actively to 7 or 8. Students that we work with at Student Athlete Showcase will reach out to 200, 300 coaches every couple of months. So it really just depends on, where in the country you want to be, what division you want to play, how open are you. If you're like, I definitely want to stay on the West Coast, but if Harvard, gives me a spot on their team, I'll go. Then your college list will just be a little bit different than somebody that, only wants to go to school in Texas.
Try being recruited in the 90s, Aaron. Okay, so you're not. You're young.
I feel old.
All right. That sounds good. All right, let's go back to admissions. Nora, how much weight is placed on test scores versus GPA?
Okay, so you guys are going to hate me for this, but it's another it depends question. There's not one formula that these schools will either advise to us or release to us or even publish in general. I can't quantify how much weight is placed on test scores versus GPA. What I will say is that they're both part of holistic admissions and admissions in general. So they are pieces to the puzzle, as Jacob was saying. Depending on what your profile is, what classes you've taken relative to what classes are offered at your school, how many honors versus non-honors courses you've taken. A GPA can look so many different ways. And in all honesty, there are probably 6 GPAs that are listed on your transcript right now. It's hard to tell one from the other. Even schools that, will publish their GPA calculations like UCs, there's not just that GPA that they're looking at. They're looking at the story behind the GPA. And in many cases, college admissions offices will not even tell us how they will calculate their GPA, your GPA on their end. It's vastly different, and you can't really predict that. In regards to test scores, depends on the school, depends on how much weight they're putting into it. There are, and I think I saw Jacob mention this in the chat, there are a slew of test optional schools, which may be a good fit for someone who may not be the best test taker. So I definitely recommend checking out fairtest.org to see if, maybe your academics are way better than your test scores. Test optional schools might be a good fit for you. So I recommend doing your research on that. That is all to say that there are so many determining factors in a college admission packet and process, depending on the student, depending on your extracurriculars, your recommendation letters, your essays. There are so many other things that go into the process, and so it's hard to quantify the weight on each of those. So that I'll talk about recommendations for this one too. How much do counselor recommendations play a role in admissions? They could be relatively significant. What I will say is that students often say, I've never met my counselor. I have to go talk to them the first time in September of my senior year. You should talk to them as early as possible and develop a relationship with your counselor. For not only for the purpose of the recommendation, but your counselor might be the way for you to have a lot of opportunities. They might have a scholarship that came in the door that they might, suggest that you apply to, or there may be an internship or activity opportunity that they'd want to point you to. Talk to your counselor, develop a relationship with them, and that way when you actually do have to ask them for a letter of recommendation, it may carry more weight because the counselor does have a really great relationship with you. So schools know that you would have a closer relationship with your teacher than your counselor in most cases. So that is taken into account. But, a counselor recommendation is important. They do share the qualities of you. They share the qualities of what activities and what extracurriculars and classes you've taken into account in high school. And something else to note about the counselor recommendation is that there will also be something attached called the school profile, which kind of notes what is offered at your school, what the grade distribution is, how many classes are offered, what types of classes are offered. And so there's a lot of information that goes into the counselor recommendation that may not be present in the teacher recommendation letter. So it is important. Anthony, I actually can't see that third question. Do you mind reading that one to me? It's covered by the little.
By our pictures.
Yeah.
If under the school's middle range of the profile, so let's just say you're under the 25%.
Okay.
Or maybe you're in the 30 to 40 on the lower end, what becomes really important as an applicant? So I'm assuming this student is picking a school that they're below where they should be, so it's probably a reach school for them. So maybe they're guessing, what else do I need to do? What becomes really important?
Yeah.
And maybe where they have a chance to get in.
Great question. So this is where your activities come in, and your jobs, and the extra ways that you've taken to take advantage of what learning is out there, what you were able to learn via your curiosity only. The teacher letters of recommendation, your essays, all of these things go into account. And it's not to say that if you're below that particular range in the mid profile that you're not going to get in. But it does mean that your other areas will be highlighted and showcased. So really take advantage of every opportunity you have to show who you are in your application. And this doesn't necessarily only mean the essays. I mean, there's an entire activity section in the Common application and on the UC application where you can write little mini essays detailing things that you've done that may not be reflected anywhere else. So it's really important for you to share as much as you possibly can about who you are, about what you're interested in, about why you're interested in the school itself, because you never know if you might be an addition to the body, right? So one thing I do like to say about schools is that they're admitting a class. They're not admitting one particular type of person. They're admitting a class, and they want different people within that class. So play to your strengths, speak to your individualism, and really make sure that you are putting together the best pieces of you in the application.
And make sure that 8 or 10 schools aren't where you're under the profile. Then you're probably not picking a good list for you. So you got, again, it's about balance as well. But that's what you have to work on creating that. The other question that is on this page had to do with, we already talked about UCs and Cal States. What are they looking for? The other part was the GPAs, which are actually in those files that I sent you. So you can take a look. But obviously going with a high test score, you're going to see really high GPAs, the 4.0s and higher for some of those. So take a look at that, and that'll help you build your list here. So back to recruiting, Erin, how personal should I make the interactions?
Make them really personal. So we always say recruiting is all about building relationships with coaches, and the more that they can get to know you and feel comfortable with you, the more likely they are to offer you a scholarship. So they're looking for someone that can bring a positive energy to their team. They're looking for someone who has a good attitude. If you're just sending, a copy paste email to 300 coaches, they're not going to think that you're, taking the time to get to know them, to research their program. So you do want to make sure it's pretty personal. I would always recommend to, just follow up with coaches, even in like following their Twitter account, or they're following the team's account, retweeting them, giving them a shout out, congratulations, anything along those lines, just to show that, you're really invested in building that relationship and making sure that you're getting to know the coach. Plus, you're going to want to play for a coach that you feel a personal connection for. So, if you're reaching out to coaches and you're not getting personal with it, you're probably missing out on a really good fit that you might have found elsewhere.
Great. Nora, you got a really long one, and it's very specific, but at the same time, it kind of touches on the general that we talk about and rules of thumb. So if you want to
definitely
go for that.
So it is pretty specific. So Basically, it's about being accepted to a target reach school and being accepted to safety schools and given money. So here is what I would say about that. Depending on the type of graduate school that your son is trying to get into, it may be important for them to be a big fish in a small pond and be more near the top of their class. It really depends, though, on this. Where is your son going to be happiest and feel like he is able to really take advantage of his education, where he is going to be able to take advantage of the resources, where he might have the best academic program that is the best fit for him, because that will really be the basis of his success at that school. It's not to say that he would be more successful at a safety school, right? But it is to say that he would be more successful at a school where the environment is right for him, where they have the types of classes that he'd actually enjoy. Things to take into consideration are class sizes, are professor availability, are whether he would take advantage of office hours. There are so many different factors that go into that, and I'd really recommend that, now that he's been admitted, you take advantage of things like Admitted Students Day, where you can go to the college campus, you can talk to faculty, you can talk to other students that are there, and really take in as much information as possible so that he can make the most informed choice as he can. The fact that, they're kind of equivalent in price is awesome. So you kind of get rid of that little barrier there. And I think that you deducing the schools that are on his list that he's making his contenders, he needs to take into account, like I said, the fit, the environment, whether he'd be happy at that school, what kinds of things he would take advantage of that are there. If all those are in play, and if he feels comfortable with the environment and with the classes that are offered, then he could be equally successful at a target reach school versus a safety school. It just depends on where he feels is going to be the best fit for him and where he feels is going to be the most successful for him.
Great, thanks, Noor. And Jacob, I think you touched on it. You just want to repeat that question, UC school preference.
So no preference at virtually every single school in the country now, SAT or ACT, so no preference. So really take advantage of the practice exams and your PSAT if you're a younger student that you're going to be taking, and really figure out which tests you do better on and focus in on one exam.
We had another question in there. Shreya had asked it, and it's kind of something, I'm just going to bring it up again because we talked a little bit about it, but it was, what prep do I need to do? And guys, it's not a one size fits all with that, and again, as Noor says, I'm going to steal her line. It depends. But when you're defining your score, so Jacob showed you this slide, and let's just say you took a practice SAT and you scored 1200 and your goal is USC or NYU, and you can see up here that they're a couple hundred points higher. Well, then that kind of tells you right away that it's not like you can buy a book and study it for one day. That's not going to get you that improvement. So it's really going to depend on what your goals are, what schools you're looking at, and how you define your goal. That's going to determine what prep you do. Do you do a free prep? Do you do a more intensive prep? Do you do something that, Jacob provides tutoring? Do you have to do one-on-one? Do you prefer a class? I mean, there's so many factors that go into it. So there's no one answer. It's really going to be dependent on a lot of those questions that you answer for yourself. And as I said earlier, you need to go do some research and find some answers that will help at least us advise you on what that answer is. But until we know some of that, what's your budget? We can't recommend anything. For some of you, it has to be free because you don't have the budget. For some of you that have a budget, it might be this. For some of you that are willing to do anything, you might do summer camp for SAT. And some people will go, that's crazy. Why would you do that? I'd rather have a fun summer. So it's really going to be different for everybody. But just understand, set your goal. If you don't have a practice, here's a good slide too. Once you also figure out your practice test score, you can determine which test. And then once you have your baseline, you can determine what you're going to need to do to prep for that. If you miss those steps in this process, you're just blindly going at it and you don't know what to do. And you're going to go, I did the one-day class at my school and I only got 10 more points and I'm not near my goal. Then you just wasted time, money, and energy. So you don't want to fall into that trap. That's why it's important to have a game plan, even when you're planning on your prep. So Moving on, back to you, Aaron. When should I ask a coach if I can get in?
Yeah, this goes hand in hand with that whole question of building a relationship with the coach. So the sooner you have the information and can get it to the coach, the sooner they'll be able to talk with you about what your options are looking like, if you may need to retake the test again to get into the school. Each coach will have a different, set of requirements based on the institution that they're representing. So as soon as you have the score, you might as well ask, is this good enough? What can I do to make myself a more qualified candidate? Sometimes coaches can have a little bit of a pull with the admissions department, but it goes kind of back to what Nora was saying about having a school that's a good fit for you. So if you are really making a stretch to get into a school, and then on top of that, you're spending 30, 35 hours a week on athletics, you may drop the ball on your academics and then you wouldn't be eligible to play anyway. So it really is about finding that balance. And the coach, if you're, upfront with the coach, they'll be able to help you navigate, am I qualified for this? Is it a stretch? Is there something else I can do to make myself more qualified? And they can kind of help you figure that out along the way. So as soon as you have the score, I'd say just be open with the coach and navigate from there.
All right, great. And back to you, Nor. Now we're on majors. Some questions, a couple about majors.
Okay, great. Okay. Do you have a better chance for entry if you have not declared a major? You're going to predict this, but it depends.
Nor, cut it out.
That's my motto. I mean, it's just going to be right under my name on the next
All right
that I do with you. So some schools are really open with oh, did I accidentally press the whiteboard? Oops. Okay.
Oh no, I did. I was writing your motto on the board.
Okay.
I was gonna just I'm just gonna do this.
Yeah.
You can keep going.
It depends. Yes. Okay. So some schools are really open to students who are going in undeclared because honestly, what kind of 17-year-old knows exactly what they want to do with the rest of their life when they enter college? That's what college is for. And so there may be colleges that are open about you being undeclared and being okay with it and telling you what options you have. Now, if you are an engineering student and you're not sure about whether you should declare an engineering major and would go in undeclared and then try to declare an engineering major later, it might be a little more difficult for you to go in undeclared because if you're going into a major that is impacted as really competitive, then it's probably best that you know before you enter into college. At the UC schools, I would say that that's going to be a similar case where it may be harder for you to declare a certain major by the time that you are a junior. That said, I would do some research on the school and do some research on their educational practices and some, like I said, some schools, a few that I can mention, like even Colorado Boulder is pretty open about accepting undeclared students, and they may even have a cool option where within a certain school you can be exploratory under the College of Engineering or under the College of Business, and go in that way where you're going to a field, but you're not sure which field within that industry you want to go into. So definitely do your digging. The second question, can I apply to different UCs with different majors? Yes, you can. It's actually really cool. So the UC application, the beauty of it is that you're doing the exact same work for all the UCs, but what will happen is in the beginning, you are checking off each UC that you're applying to. And then once you go into the major selection, then per UC, you'll have an entire list of majors that you are going to select so that you can select different majors at different UCs.
UCLA, by the way, they accept a lot of undeclared majors, and that's okay. And for especially at the UC system, regardless of major, you can get accepted unless it's one of the engineering type majors. So, all right, moving on back to test prep. When should I start doing my SAT test, Jacob, and how should my son prepare?
I'm going to flip through towards a slide that I really like, and I'll give you kind of my experience as a student. Even though it's in 2002 and it feels ancient, it still applies. All right. So as a student, you're going to have a ton of different options, right? You have Khan Academy, you have the ACT now that have free prep options, right? You have practice exams on there, you have a study guide. There's tons of books at each of your high schools. You can go to the library and get a book. You can get a book on Amazon. The only caution I have for parents, if that's the route that you're going to go for your students, is hold them accountable, right? The stats on Khan Academy, even being a free resource, is really, really terrifying with students actually using it, right? The stats are, if a student uses it for 10 to 15 hours, they're improving a minimum of 100 points, which is awesome. But the stats on students actually getting to 10 hours are very, very low, right? So if that's the option your student's going to do, make sure to hold them accountable. Second, you can take a group class. You can take a boot camp. Some of your schools actually have classes running over the summer or during the school year. So one thing I always recommend for families that are thinking about that is class size is very important, right? If you're a student or if you're a parent of a student and you have a high flyer and they're going to ask tons of questions and they're going to sit in the front row and really be engaged, that professor a lot of the time is going to really teach to the middle, right? Because you're going to have high flyers. You're going to also have students that this is the first time they've ever thought about testing, and a lot of students, they're kind of in the bubble in the middle. So if you're thinking about classes, really pay attention to class size. Lastly, private tutoring, right? I always say it's for sure an investment, but if you're looking at it in terms of merit money, if you're looking at it in terms of getting into your dream school, the reward is always very, very heavy, right? I had a conversation the other day with one of my school counselor friends in Orange County, and they were talking about their student, and the parent was thinking about doing like a $2,000 program, and the dad said, "Hey, that's kind of expensive, don't you think?" And the counselor responded back to the parents and said, "Hey, if we can get 2 extra points on this ACT, you're going to get $8,000 every single year for 4 years in merit money." Right? So it's always looking at it as, what's the reward going to be for my student if they improve their scores, right? And I've seen, so I'm sure Anthony, yourself as well.
We just had, I just had a girl just recently. She ACT, she took a practice SAT, practice ACT, found that ACT was better, so she switched gears, but I got to them just in time, so that was good. So we switched to the better test. If she got 4 more points, University of Oklahoma was going to give her $8,000 a year. She's basically going to get this great scholarship where she's basically paying in-state tuition. She put, it was $2,500 into tutoring because that's all she had time for. She was an athlete. She couldn't do this. So it was going, but the reward could have been that much better. And so she hit it. She got it. She got in. She's accepted. And now she has this scholarship. $32,000 over that time was worth the $2,500. So again, you have to kind of weigh that and see where you are in that process. Some people are not willing to front the money, but again, with anything, things are investments, and sometimes you have to look at it like that. Same with AP testing and credit and college credit and all those things. Is it worth it? I don't know. Sometimes it's time and energy, and you go, well, shoot, if I put that in now, it can benefit me in the long run. So yeah, it works out. It can work out.
Definitely, and you hit it on the head, right? It's the time and effort, right? And that doesn't just apply to testing, right? That's your extracurricular activities, your volunteering, the sports you play, right? I always tell students, think back to the first time you tried out for football or basketball or fencing, or, if you play an instrument, the first time you did that sport or tried out, 9 out of 10 times you were probably just under average, right? And a coach saw something in you and said, you know what, I can coach this and I can really mold the student into being better, right? And I always relate that to sports where, for basketball, for football, for lacrosse, students are spending, a couple hours every single day in their sport. And if they can really take that mentality into their academics, into testing, I'm not saying spend 4 hours a day on test prep or your APs, but if you can take that mentality of, hey, this is where I am and I can improve if I put in the time and effort, you can really knock this out of the park.
Great. All right, let's head back. And so, guys, we got still a lot of questions, so we're gonna put a little more speed into this, just so we can try to get to all the questions. You guys had so many coming in. So back to athletic recruiting, Aaron. Will colleges overlook poor academic performance for talented athletes, and how much do test scores matter for athletes?
Yeah, this is something that the NCAA has actually been working a lot on, sort of raising the academic bar for athletes. And so the general rule is no, they're not going to totally overlook poor test scores or bad grades. You will have a little bit of wiggle room just within the range of who in general is admitted to that school. But test scores definitely matter. The NCAA, to compete at all for Division I, you have to have at least a 2.3 GPA in the core courses. And that doesn't include your PE A+, or your, workshop A that you got. So you got to get in your English, math, science classes a 2.3. With that 2.3, then they have a sliding scale that shows you which test scores you need to get to maintain your eligibility. So if you're down at that 2.3 level, you need to have a higher ACT or SAT score. If your GPA is a little higher, you can have some more flexibility with a little bit of a lower test score. But they pair the GPA and the test scores, and it really does matter, because if you don't qualify for eligibility, you won't be able to play. A D2, you can actually go down to a 2.2 for your high school GPA with that sliding scale. D3 schools, it'll just depend on the school. Each school has its own different academic requirements. But in general, the test scores really do matter. And you're not going to get to play if you can't meet the academic requirements.
Great, thank you. So Jacob, our son achieved 1510 proctored exam. How much difference if he gets to 1550 or better in terms of merit scholarships?
So first off, your son already scored off the charts, right? If we go to that concordance chart, they're already above the 90th percentile. And that specific of a question, it really depends on the school, right? If the school awards merit money, maybe there's some additional funds, but you're already scoring over the 90th percentile on a proctored exam, right? And if your student took that PSAT or an actual SAT, they scored so high, I would recommend you sign up for a test right away and have them take the exam, right? There's no reason to wait. Your student already scored very, very high.
Great. All right, Nor, this is where we got so many questions on activities, and we're still getting them coming in. So I gave you 4, and they're, love for you to just kind of go through them, kind of share your advice about activities, because a lot of people are feeling inadequate because they see someone else. And I had this one come in late, and I didn't get it on the board, but it's like, I feel like I don't do enough. Like all these people are doing a million things, and people feel inadequate, and you had a response in here, Nor, too. It's not necessarily about quantity, in that. So I would love for you to kind of share your thoughts about activities and some of these questions. And if you can't read them, I'm happy to read them.
Yeah, definitely. 4. No, I think I can read all of them except for 4. So I'll get through the first 3 and then I'll
okay.
Thank you. Can you be admitted with a sport or musical activity? Yes, you can. What extracurricular activities are included? Everything. I mean, everything. I have kids who are, you know what? I'll back up and say this. Whenever I ask a student what their hobbies are and they don't mention video games, I have a feeling that they're going to say it, and I ask them about it. So parents are kind of worried about video games being a hobby. But I had 2 students in this last year apply to school for video game design. And a lot of their activities were centered around computer programming for video games. So that's a very valid activity that the student cared very much about and actually ended up turning that into a major. I have students who are working at a farmer's market. I have students who are doing research at a lab at UCI. It really depends on what you care about, what you want to spend more time doing, and what you're interested in. There's not one particular formula that you need. There's not one particular type of activity that you need to do in order to get into college. The second question, do colleges care more about academics or extracurriculars? How can I truly show who I am to colleges through my extracurriculars? In general, academics are going to be a little more important. That's not to say that extracurriculars are not, but you still have to demonstrate that you're a strong student relative to who you are and what schools you're applying to. How can you truly show who you are to colleges? So there are so many opportunities for you to showcase your extracurriculars, either through the essay, through asking for a letter of recommendation from your English teacher, who's also your club advisor, through writing really great descriptions for your activities. There are plenty of places for you to really hone in on what you've done and what your accomplishments are. And there's going to be no shortage of places for you to describe that. What types of extracurriculars do colleges value most to admit potential students? Do things like leadership and community service look better than others on college applications? This kind of goes back to the first couple of questions. There's not one set of activities that schools are looking for. And what I'll also say is leadership can reflect so many different things. You don't have to be ASB president to still be a leader. So within the spectrum of what you're currently doing, how are you leading and how are you showing leadership? That can mean so many different things. I had a couple of students who were volunteering at a hospital and they showed leadership through their, gift shop volunteering activity. I have a student who he actually ended up writing a cool essay on how he was really into video games, and there was this group that he was the captain of. I mean, that's a way for him to show leadership that is not necessarily the traditional conventional way. When it comes to volunteering and community service, I would say think about what you enjoy doing and try to turn that into community service. So I've had kids do volunteer golf coaching. I've had kids who assisted an art teacher in class. I mean, again, think about what you do, think about playing to your strengths and how you lead and how you are showing passion in those ways. Again, there's not one formula. There is not something that will be the magic ticket for you to get into college. What colleges are looking for is the passion, the determination, the commitment to those activities and showing what you truly care about. I'm not seeing the second part of this question.
Yeah, the fourth question, I don't know why I'm echoing, but I'm passionate about playing volleyball and in band, and if I continue both, will colleges see that as a negative? Well, I guess if you're playing volleyball and you're playing the tuba while you're playing volleyball, then maybe it's a negative because your team won't be as good. But what do you say about that, Nor?
I don't think that's negative at all. I think what I would say is, how are you handling it, right? So is it overtaking your academics? If not, then I think you should continue. Is it causing you to only get 2 hours of sleep per night? If so, then I would consider maybe removing one of the activities or kind of paring down on one. It depends on what you're doing, how much workload you have, how many hours of sleep you're getting per night. And no, it's not normal to go to sleep at 3 a.m. and wake up at 6 a.m. You should be getting a good amount of hours of sleep. If you are aptly handling both, then I think it's great for you to continue and it's not a negative.
Great. And for you, Erin, next question is, what impact does social media have on recruiting?
Yeah, that is a huge question, and more relevant today than ever. So everyone hears the horror stories of the scholarship loses, the recruit loses their scholarship because of a nasty tweet or something. And that does happen. So my colleague Haley she works for Student Athlete Showcase. She came out of the TCU football program working for Coach Patterson there. And they have an entire office in the football department dedicated solely to going through kids' social media profiles that they're recruiting. So nothing is private, even if you think it is. They'll find your friends' profiles. They'll see what you're tagged in. They'll look through your posts from years ago. all of this as a character assessment to see what type of person are they bringing onto their program. So the first key is just to make sure that your profiles are clean, your language is clean, you're promoting a positive image of yourself. It really is like your own personal brand. So you want to make sure that you're posting, pictures of you and your teammates after a tough loss, maybe encouraging words of how you deal with those situations. If you have that sort of like clean slate, clean profile, then you can really start to actively use it to your advantage. So things like following the coaches on Twitter and Instagram, retweeting things about their athletic departments, shouting out coaches after a win against a rival, posting a celebratory picture of you and your teammates after a win, publicly thanking a coach for a conversation that you had with them on the phone. All of those are ways that, aside from the horror stories of how social media can negatively affect your recruiting, there's so many ways that you can use it positively as well. So we just say, make sure you start with your clean profile and then just really use it to interact with coaches, build that positive brand, and make yourself look like somebody that they would, really enjoy having on their team and want to play for their program.
Great. We got another question in. I'm going to answer really quickly just to move things along. Can universities see PSAT test results? The College Board who gives the exams, they don't send those scores to colleges. It's not intended to be part of the admissions decisions. So they do send the scores to the National Merit Scholarship Corporation, which is the test sponsor, the co-sponsor. And then some of the scores are sent to other scholarship and recognitions programs. So that's something to note. There's a search service program that you opt into, and that's why you probably get some college information when you take the PSAT. But the schools do not get them. They're not part of the admissions. So I'm going to move that one on. So we are back to college admissions and activities, Nora. There's 3 more in there about summer programs and hobbies and stuff.
Okay, great. So the first question, how are summer programs at elite schools viewed? So I think it's great that students are looking into summer programs, applying to them, getting accepted to them at these elite schools like Yale and Brown. Those two are prominent in having summer programs available. It is not the goal to get for you though. So I think you should approach the summer program if it's a good fit for you, if you're truly interested in the subject, and that way you can show that you're curious and that you took the next step to learn about that particular subject. But if you attended a summer program at Brown and you're still not necessarily within the academic profile of getting admitted to the school, it's not going to be the thing that turns you on to getting into Brown. It really, again, depends on what you're getting out of it. If that spurred you on to really look into theoretical physics and you really spent a lot of time researching it after you went to that summer program, then that's going to be significant, right? So what is it driving you to do? What are you learning about? Those are important factors, but it's not going to be the thing that gets you in. Should I list my hobbies? This is a great question. If your hobbies are taking up a significant amount of time for you, then yes. One of my students last year spent a lot of time baking. I mean, she would test out so many different recipes. Her essay was about how she was doing experiments with them. She wrote a really fantastic essay about baking. She spent a lot of time doing it, a significant amount of hours per week baking. And so for her, I would say, yes, she should add baking to the list. On the other hand, if you sporadically go on hikes once a month, then maybe hiking is not a hobby that you'd want to add on your activity list. When you're putting together your activity list on your applications, colleges are looking for commitment. They're looking for interest and curiosity and things that you actually do on a consistent basis. So if it's something that you only do occasionally, then I wouldn't veer towards listing it. Does travel count for activities? That depends. That depends. It depends. That's my favorite phrase. So depending on what kind of travel you did, right? If you just went to a hotel with your family and you did all the touristy things, traveling somewhere for 2 weeks, then I don't necessarily think it's worth it for you to list. If you traveled because you went, I'll actually bring up an example of one of my students from this past year. Through their science department at school, they got to take a trip to Galapagos Island and do some tests and observe animals and do a lot of things that related to animal science. And she was an animal science major. So that's the kind of travel that I would have had her list on her application. Relative to what you were able to do there, if you're going on a leisurely vacation, then travel is not necessarily something you'd want to list. But if you went for a language immersion trip, or you went to do service, or again, you went for academic reasons, then travel is worth counting for an activity.
All right, and there's another one too about engineering.
Oh, sorry, it was in a different
That's
color.
right. Yeah, no, I
Glanced over it. What extracurricular activities should I engage in to appeal to competitive colleges if I'm planning on being an engineer? Great question. First of all, think of the type of engineering you're interested in doing. So somebody who is interested in being a civil engineer will do vastly different things from someone who is interested in being a computer engineer. Summer programs might be a really great place to start. I would take a look at summer programs in the local area at universities. There are tons offered. There's one, there's a pretty big contingency of engineering summer programs hosted by Johns Hopkins, Cal Poly SLO. There are so many different colleges that offer an engineering program. That said, the beauty about being an engineer is that there are so many things that you could do to showcase the fact that you'd actually want to be an engineer. So being hands-on, doing projects at home, building something because your mom needed something to be more efficient, building a gaming computer, learning programming on Code Academy. It really depends on what kind of engineering focus you want, what your financial situation is, and what you're able to do relative to that. Let's say that you're not able to afford a summer program that's, relatively expensive. There are a ton of open courses online, hosted by colleges like MIT, UCI, Harvard, that are free, where you can download video lectures and you can do the assignments if you really want to geek out in that way, that are totally available for you to use. So I definitely check out, look up OpenCourseWare and go from there. You can learn about a variety of subjects.
Great. Back to you, Erin. Are showcases and camps my best sources of college exposure?
Yeah, you'll see a lot of promotion for summer camps at colleges and showcases. And what it really comes down to is, what's your budget? Have you been talking to the coaches? And do you think that going to this camp is going to move you forward with that coach? So in general, a lot of camps will cost anywhere from $300 to $1,000 just to attend. And you add on the travel to and from, any lodging, far away, you got to stay overnight. That can really add up. So you want to make sure you're really carefully selecting places and camps if that's the route you want to take. The other side of it is that a lot of times these camps invite a couple 100, 500 kids. So unless you're actually talking with the coach is expecting you to be there, and you're sort of on the short list of kids that the coach is there to see, you're probably going to get overlooked. Then it's really a matter of, is it worth it to you to spend that time, that money on going to the camp if you're not actually come away with any sort of one-on-one time or one-on-one evaluation with the coach. Now, if a coach reaches out to you and says, hey, I want to be able to see you compete here. I'm inviting you to this camp. I'd like to personally invite you, to this workshop. Then those are the opportunities that you should be looking really carefully at and really, spending more time thinking about if it's worth it for you. So if you know you're going to get something out of it, if you know the coach is there to see you, it's a great opportunity. If you're just going to show up and be one of the 500 kids putting $1,000 into this school's football program, you might want to think twice before you spend all that time and energy going there.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Erin. I'm just Nora's been answering some great questions on in the chat as well. There was one from a room about decile rank too that I just answered. I see a lot of your questions. I just want to make this blanket statement for everybody. I want you to understand, it's just a lot of times like, tell me what activities I should do, or I'm going to do what the school tells me to do because that's I want to go to that school. And if you lead that way, that's a bad recipe. Okay, you need to lead with you first, what you're interested in, what you want to do, as opposed to what someone else is telling. And I know you kind of want answers, guys, but I'm just telling you what we've been saying, and the theme of it is like kind of lead what you're interested in. Take the classes you're interested in. Follow what you're thinking, as opposed to doing because UCLA wants you to do it, or doing another school wants you to do it or something. So when we look at these, and some of your questions, some of them are great, but some of them also can be easily found by quick research. Like, I'm interested in medicine. I don't know what to do. And you're not working hard enough to find out what you need to do. If you're interested in the area, there's so many ways to find out what you can do. Talk to people, research online. So I encourage you to do the work necessary to find these answers out, as opposed to just let somebody tell you what you need to do. So again, I don't know what's interesting to you. You need to direct it and lead that. So what I'm going to tell you is, especially for my juniors, and I just had a college planning tips for junior webinars in January, so you should watch it. You own this process. You need to lead the process. Parents need to let the kids lead the process. If you don't share that information with us, it's hard to help you. But if you're leading the way, it's going to be a better experience, and you'll actually be choosing things and doing internships or doing whatever classes that you want to be doing, and it's going to be a better process. So again, when you're looking at activities as well, it's kind of the same theme that goes around that. So I don't want you to lose sight of that, okay? So now flipping to testing, Jacob, people want to know like techniques to get my scores up. What can you tell them either real quickly or what they can do to kind of figure some of that out? Besides, obviously take Revolution Prep, they're going to give you some of those tips to enhance your scores, but it's more than that. So
my big suggestion, if you do nothing at all this semester for spring semester, is sign up for the practice exams, right? At least you'll get real life testing situations, right? You have to wake up early, you have to be there on time, you have to find a room at a school you're not familiar with, you have to eat breakfast, you have to bring a snack, you have to do all these things that you're going to be doing on actual test day, right? So if nothing else this spring you do, make sure you sign up for those practice exams. We hope to see all of you guys there. I think in the fall we had close to 2,000 students doing testing on a Saturday. There's even Sunday dates, right? And if you can't make any of those dates, download a practice exam. But the one thing I found in my 7 or 8 years of test prep now is the students who do programs that do practice tests every week, every other week, score significantly higher. And I get it. It's tedious to spend a couple hours doing a test, but you're really training yourself to look at the test over and over and say, okay, for these 4 hours, I'm going to focus. I'm going to put all my attention and energy into answering these questions. And by the time you take the real test, you're already far above anyone who hasn't taken practice exams. So that's one tip I'd say. Make sure you take practice exams, 100%.
Great, thank you. And folks, we do have some, if you go to our resource library and for CUSD-Futureology/forms, we have checklists for freshmen and juniors and sophomores. We have free resources for test prep. We have a bunch of different resources you can check out. Also, for some specific strategies, how to enhance your scores, go back and watch the video on our webinar locker of me teaching you guys some tips at the college fair. I did one on testing. But again, too, also doing some prep classes and stuff like that. So again, there's the resources out there. Again, do the work, do the research, and that's going to kind of point you on the right track. Back to activities, Noor. Here we go. People are really interested in activities.
Okay, great. So this first question, kind of similar to a couple of the other ones that came up. How do I make my activities and experiences sound interesting and unique in my colleges and my applications? Use the activity descriptions as an extra way for you to really showcase your personality. So whereas you might have the instinct to list an activity and just give bullet points like a resume, you might actually be able to tell a little anecdote or a story in that. I like to give this example from one of my students a couple of years ago. He's now at Cal Poly SLO studying environmental science, but on his common application, he listed one of his activities, which he actually did a pretty significant amount of beach cleanup. And so he had a, kind of a dry sense of humor, and he was able to say in his description, as opposed to describing that you pick up trash as a beach cleanup, that's kind of implied. He was able to show what he did and use a sense of humor along the way and say, I take long walks on the beach while picking up other people's trash. I mean, that's a really great way for you to showcase your personality and your humor. You tell what you do. Exactly that. You take long walks on the beach and pick up other people's trash. So utilize your personality there. The second question. Okay. My son will earn his Eagle Scout rank in high school, but I've been told it's better for college admissions if he reaches this in his sophomore, junior, senior year, not his freshman year. If your son is on track to earn his Eagle Scout rank in freshman year, don't stop him. I don't think that's necessarily the best strategy. I think it's still equally impressive depending on which year you receive the Eagle Scout rank in. What I will say is, if he was working towards the Eagle Scout rank and then he was able to be gifted the gift of time after not being a part of Boy Scouts and not working towards that project, what else is he filling that time with? That's what you'd want to focus on. So rather than holding him back and making him wait to do his Eagle Scout, to get his Eagle Scout rank, think of other ways that he can utilize his skills. Are there any extracurriculars that actually hurt your chances of getting into a competitive university? Dogfighting? I mean, things not necessarily okay for kids to do. There's not an activity that a school will look at and scoff at, but they'll look more at your impact, about how much you care about the activity, that you're, within the law, and that you're caring about it, you're spending time on it. So there's not one activity that is going to hurt you. This next question, great question. I am not an outgoing person, so how can I be a leader without a leadership position? This is a fantastic question. And I'm saying this because I was in your position. I think that there are so many ways for you to lead from where you sit. So let's say that you are in Quiz Bowl, right? So there's a president, there's a vice president, there's all these leadership positions within Quiz Bowl. But let's also say that you're really into doing team bonding events and you like to coordinate all of those things. You could be the person that actually is coordinating every single event for your team. You guys can go and do trivia on one night and try to get together with other high school's Quiz Bowl teams. All of that can be done without being a very outgoing person. It just depends on what your skills are, what you enjoy, and what you can do in your current role. So leaders do not have to be the people that are presidents. Leaders can be, not even board members. They can be people that are members of a club that have an idea and follow through with that idea. So think of the ways that you are really good at things, the skills that you have, and focus on those and how you can contribute in that way. Okay. I don't have the time for community service because I'm too busy with my sport. Will that affect my chances? So I think a lot of people are worried about the number of hours of community service that they do. Colleges are not looking for one particular number of hours of community service. I think that some schools and most schools in these days will require you to do a certain number of hours for you to graduate. But if you're so committed to your sport that you literally have no time to spend on community service, don't uncommit from your sport. I mean, that's a significant amount of time that you're spending at being an expert in your sport. That is not a bad thing. But instead, think of ways that you can contribute through the skills that you have. So maybe it's about, like I mentioned, I have a student who was a golfer and decided that he wanted to help other kids, in coaching golf once a month. That's a way for you to do community service without having to commit 20 hours a week and taking away from your particular activity. I want to address that question from Max.
Yeah.
I saw that. Are colleges ready to hear about esports and gaming as extracurricular activities? Questions for you to address. Are you ranked? There are actual ranked people in these gaming leagues, and If that's a significant amount of time for you, if you're entering in tournaments and winning competitions, then yeah, that could actually be something you could list in your application. And I also hear that there are some esports scholarships out there. So definitely,
And my alma mater,
at
UCI.
UC Irvine, they have a really great esports arena too. Tons of video game clubs there. So that's the kind of school that would be very receptive to something like that.
If I didn't know I didn't have to run around a soccer field or baseball time, I could have sat in a chair and got some money for school. Maybe I would have done that. But back in my day, they didn't even, I don't know if games were even available. Let's just put it that way. All right. Just trying to wrap it up. We got about 12 minutes left and we're really using the time and we're going through. So for you, Aaron, how involved should I get my high school and our club coaches in my recruiting? I hear this all the time.
Yeah, this is a really popular question. So it comes down a lot to how much time does your high school or club coach have. So a lot of times your high school coach is also a teacher, may also be a parent. They may not be able to have a really heavy hand in your recruiting as well as all of your teammates recruiting. So the first benchmark is how much time does your coach have? Secondly, the college coaches are going to want to talk to your high school or club coach at some point as a vouch for your work ethic, your character. If there's anything that your stats on paper don't reflect, they will need to sort of get involved in that sense. That could just be a written recommendation letter from your coach. It might be a phone call, but it is important that your college coach that you're talking to can get in touch with your high school coach at some point, just to have that extra layer as they're sort of researching you to see if you'll be a good fit for their program. The second, like a quick note, a way they might be able to also get involved is that restrictions right now say that college coaches can't make contact with an athlete before September 1st of their junior year for most sports. There's sort of loopholes around that because the athlete can contact the coach before that date. And a lot of times the high school coaches help to set those conversations up. So your high school coach may be talking to the college coach and say, hey, you know, this athlete is going to call you at 4:00 on Monday. Is that a time that you will be there to answer the phone? Because the coach won't be able to call the athlete back if they miss the call. But if they're there to take the call, you'll be able to have a conversation. So that's another way that your high school or club coach might be able to get involved.
Great. I'm going to run through a couple of these just to kind of wrap some stuff up. How do you find paid assisting jobs for your professors at university and college? Just like you would find any other jobs. I mean, but if you're on campus, you can talk to your professors. You can do some online searching. Go to your career center at school. So if you're at school, it's like you would if you were trying to find a job here. So you can definitely use your career center more if they know what's going on. But if you want a job with a particular professor, you know, you should talk to that professor. As far as paid, unpaid, that's really, you never know. And so if it has to be paid, then your criteria is going to be a little bit tougher, and then you can't just take anything. But a lot of it's just going to be good old-fashioned legwork and research. Grades and test scores affecting merit scholarships? Sure they can. If you go up, we just talked about that story before, you go up 4 points, you can get some merit aid. Again, it's also going to depend on the schools you apply to. If you're in the top 5% of the schools you apply to, you're probably going to have a chance to affect the merit scholarships. If you're in the middle range, you're probably not going to get merit scholarships. So really, that is going to be determined by the schools you're picking and where your grades and your test scores kind of are. We went over that one. If you're going to Saddleback, you don't need your SAT or ACT scores, so kind of pass that on. We talked about standing out more. There's a few more scholarship ones I will cover real quickly, even though this wasn't financial aid. For financial aid information, I sent this in an email out to everybody. On our webinar locker, there's some financial aid webinars that you can rewatch, and there's some information on there. So I would highly suggest going there. And in our resource library, which is again is on our website, there's a scholarship search document that you can use to help you talking about scholarships. So in terms of applying for financial aid, typically you're filling out the FAFSA of your senior year, but look at some resources that we have on our resource library and start learning about it and watch those videos. Is there a good way to find out before you apply to a college about merit aid they offer? Yes, it's called research and going online and looking at those schools and what they have to offer. So you can definitely do that. There's also some scholarship search sites that you can. I'm going to send you right now in a file share a document that is a resource document that has a bunch of different financial aid sites, some scholarship sites, some good information on just college applications, college search sites. So download that and then start taking a look at it. You're going to have to do the legwork. Again, it's a lot of research. So that's what I'll say about some aid and financial aid for that being. So let's go to the last slide. Great. And we have 7 minutes or so. So Aaron, heavily recruited versus lightly recruited. I know all these athletes I talk to, they think they're being heavily recruited and they're not a lot of times. Can you kind of put it in a little perspective for them, the differences between that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we sort of use a thermometer as our analogy at Student Athlete Showcase. If you're a cold or cool level recruit, so lightly recruited, you're getting the mailings from coaches. They might send you sort of those just copy paste emails, mass emails that they send out to rosters in general saying, hey, come fill out our questionnaire. Hey, submit your film. So those are just they're less personal. You're getting lightly recruited. Moderately recruited is when you're actually starting to get some personal emails, personal phone calls from coaches. So, hey, tell me a little bit more about your season here, or hey, I watched your video, here's some feedback I have for you. So when it becomes more personalized, that's when you can say that you're getting moderately recruited. Heavily recruited, though, that's when you're getting coaches asking you to come out for official visits. They'll pay for your flight, they'll pay for you to come visit the school and see the program. You'll be getting verbal offers, you'll start negotiating scholarships. You might get invited to a personal one-on-one coaching clinic with them. So that's kind of where you're being more heavily recruited, as if not only is it personal contact, but it's really giving you the indication that they're going to want you on their team and you have a pretty good shot of getting a scholarship offer.
Fantastic. Nora, for you, for competitive private school indicates test score is not required. Does not submitting a score hurt your chances of being admitted? I'll kind of classify it as an admissions question.
That's a great question. It kind of depends on what the rest of your academic profile looks like. So if it's truly going to negate the rest of your academics, then it's not going to hurt you. But if it's actually going to be of benefit for you to showcase, okay, I worked hard on this, I got this test score, my academics are a little stronger, then that's something that you should consider. I would say you should heavily research test optional schools. A good way for you to even research this is to contact your local admissions counselor and ask them and tell them about your situation. They might be able to give you some really great advice. And they'd love to hear from students. Students, I would say, not necessarily parents, but the students should reach out because they're the ones that are going to be attending the school and applying to the college.
I would suggest at our college fair, we're also coming up, we do that in October, and then in March, we're doing a mock case study night. I'm going to share that file with you where you're going to have some out-of-state schools coming. That's a great place to ask that question to some of these schools. Also, understand that some of those test optional schools, they will use test scores for some possible scholarship opportunities. So again, if you do your research, you'll know that. So don't just not send it because then you might missing out on an opportunity. So be careful with that. Last couple questions. I'm going to skip down to more of the activities one because we got so many of them, Nora. So there's another group of 4 there that I'd love to kind of hit.
Okay. My son is not doing any activities or sports and doesn't seem to like anything. How can I help him find something? Talk it out. Ask him what he's interested in. Think about the things that he cares about. Think about the things that actually take up his time, play to his strengths, and try to explore. I mean, I think testing it out in the first couple of years of high school is going to be important. So tell him to try to attend Club Rush or any kind of club activity event that they have at school. Test them. If he is into not necessarily traditional activities, that might be something that you maybe don't even know about. He may be spending a lot of time reading about computers and tech parts and things like that. How can you showcase that? How can you elevate that hobby into an actual activity? Okay, if it would eventually like to go into sports medicine, would refereeing youth soccer and football games be a good extracurricular activity? Yeah, that's an awesome extracurricular activity. And what I will also say is colleges know that a high schooler will not have access to sports medicine. So that's something to be aware of, right? So if your school does offer an ROP class in sports medicine, that could be a good place for you to start. But if they don't, college is not going to fault you for not having sports medicine experience by the time you get into school. I think that any way that you're able to get involved in your sport or in another sport, even shadowing a physical trainer or athletic trainer within the sport might be a cool way for you to learn more about the activity. Again, there's not necessarily one prescribed way, but taking advantage of your situation is going to be a good place for you to start. Should I list how I spend my summers? Depends on what you're doing in the summer. If you're just chilling and relaxing and going to Starbucks with your friends, and not necessarily doing much in the summer, then you're not going to want to list every single thing. But let's say that one of your big hobbies is surfing, and in the summer you're literally getting up at 5 a.m. to surf every single day. That's something significant that you should be listing and you should be talking about. Okay, this is a good question. What if there isn't much to say or it was a one-time event? Quality over quantity here. If you literally have nothing to say about one Red Cross blood drive that you did and you never did it again, it is not worth listing on your application.
Great. And then we're going to do one last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. Division III and money, or no, since there's no scholarships, you want to touch on that for a second?
Yeah, so that's correct. Division III schools can't offer scholarships under the label of athletic scholarships, but a lot of times, if you just talk to the coach, they can put together really impressive financial aid packages for you that aren't necessarily need-based. So you do have access to need-based money. There's also merit scholarships, leadership grants. A lot of these schools have a lot of different pools of money that they can pull from and put together a really impressive package for you. So we just had a girl in Michigan commit to a school, D3. She ended up with over $150,000 over her 4 years. And that's, no athletic money at all. So the coach can really work with the admissions and the financial aid office to put together still a lot of money for you if you're qualified.
I'm still here. My battery was running low on my computer. So, well, everyone, we still have a bunch of people left, but I'm going to wrap it up. We don't have any more questions. I think we hit them all, and we got through most of them that were pre-submitted. So, one, I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight and staying so long. It was 2 hours, and yet we feel like we have so many more questions to answer. But I really thank you, Aaron, for coming. Noor, thank you so much. Jacob had a runoff. He had his baby waiting, and so, but we all thank you very much. And we do have, and I'm going to send a follow-up email to everybody who's attended tonight with Aaron's email, with Noor's email, Jacob's email, my email, if you want to follow up with us individually. Again, these guests, they have their own programs within their fields. They are private services. Now, CUSD doesn't necessarily endorse any of their programs, but you're more than welcome to reach out to them directly and have conversations about what they do. Obviously, Futureology is one of your resources that is free. You're welcome, everybody. Thank you. But it's a free resource to you. Hopefully, you'll come to more of our events or watch some of the ones that we've already had. And I sent you a bunch of flyers that you can download about all the upcoming events and activities. So thank you. And again, Aaron and Nora, I appreciate your time and expertise.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night, everybody. Thanks, James. Thanks, Max. Arun, hopefully your questions were answered. Shreya, Skylar, Jessica, Aaron. Fantastic. Signing off.